Okay, I'm going to go ahead and record Chapter 22 notes. I think that this is where we had left off. It's actually more common to have two proportions than one because we frequently compare one proportion to another. So the good thing is that you're going to get to use the calculator completely with this, and there will not be all that box of computation that you have to do yourself. The main difference, other than the calculator, is that now you have to show and define two proportions. So let's practice. Would being a support group that meets regularly help people who are wearing the nicotine patch actually quit smoking? So a county health department tries to experiment using several hundred volunteers who are planning to use the patch to help them quit smoking. The subjects were randomly divided into two groups. People in Group 1 were given the patch and attended a weekly discussion. So Group 1, they had two things, the patch and a weekly discussion meeting with counseling and others trying to quit. People in Group 2 also used the patch, but they did only the patch, and they did not participate in the counseling groups. After 6 months, then here's the results of the Group 1 and the Group 2. Do these results suggest that such support groups could be an effective way to help people stop smoking? So we're going to be comparing two proportions together, the proportion of the two separate groups, which that means we have to define both proportions. So if you think back, one of the groups is P, and I put a little subscript C for counseling, and that is the proportion of smokers with patch and counseling that quit. So they had the patch and the counseling. T of, let's see, I think I put a little P here. P of P is the proportion of smokers with patch only that quit. So the difference between these two sets are one has counseling and one does not. So one variable. All right, so let's do our hypothesis statement. So our null hypothesis, we always start with an equal sign. So we're saying that there is equal success rate in those two groups. So the patch only and the patch with counseling have the same success. Now the alternative comes up and is about the question itself. Does this suggest that support groups are an effective way to help people stop smoking? Effective would mean that the proportion that do counseling in addition to the patch have a higher, so a greater than success rate than the proportion that do the patch alone. Now, here comes the part that is new. It is how we do this in your calculator. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and erase these numbers and we'll put those up in a second. So what I want to do is show you then on the TI-83 where you go to do this. So you're going to start with your calculator, and you are going to choose the Stat button and go over to Tests. So over to Tests. So we're going to go looking down these options. Later we're going to do one proportion z-test. I will let you do that by that with one proportion. But what we are currently doing is this number 6, two proportion z-test. So hit number 6. And now let me talk to you about these numbers here. This x1 is the number of successful people in that first group. So I usually like to make myself a little note. So this is my calculator stuff that I'm putting in. X1 and N1 have to do with the counseling group. X2 and N2 have to do with the patch only group. And then my sign I'm going to be using is a greater than sign. So let's now go over here. For X1, It has to be a whole number of people. Let's see what our statement was about. Okay, after 6 months, 46 of the 143 quit smoking. So that means that success was 46, in the sample was 143. And then in my second group, you can see from this statement here that 30 of the 151 were successfully quit smoking. So 30 and 151. So on my calculator, I'm going to go and put those numbers in. So 46 of the 143, 30 of the 151. Now, on this next thing, you have options of your tails. So this is saying your proportion 1 is not equal to proportion 2. We haven't really had that. Here, the next one is less than, and we were wondering about it being greater than. So I'm going to move my cursor over to the greater than. That means proportion 1 is greater than the success rate of proportion 2. And I'm going to highlight that. Once I get done with that, I will arrow down to calculate, and I will calculate that. And from that, it gives you these top two numbers are the ones you're interested in. So your p-value is 2.41, and I'm sorry, that's your z-score, sorry, and your p-value is 0.0080. Okay, so that is what you're going to use. And from that, then the rest is the same. So I have a p-value that is less than my alpha. Since the p-value is low, you're going to reject HO. So think about this. If you are rejecting the null, then you do have evidence that counseling, the proportion of people in counseling is higher that are successful, is higher than. So these results suggest that such support groups, the counseling, are an effective way to help people quit smoking. All right, now, on the next page, there is one little thing. Oh, and then I go into the error again. And so I'll just leave that there for you if you want to do this, recalling the type 1 error and such. And you can pause here if you need to try those on your own and then take a look at that, but that is review. Now, there is something on part 2 that I do need to talk to you about because it affects how you put things into the calculator. So this problem is about two different kinds of chicken, ones at Jennie-O and ones that are store brand. So we're going to compare those two, and we're going to see if it is safer to buy Jennie-O product. So we're comparing Jennie-O to store brand, and then the thing I want you to notice is the format of the successes that they give you. In both cases, they say in one 33% of 75, and in the other 45% of 75. So real quickly, I define P of J as the proportion of Jennie-O packages that have this Campylobacter contamination, that have the bacteria. And PS is the proportion of store brand packages that have the bacteria. So our hypotheses, of course, we start off that they are the same in what they have, but since we wonder if Jennie-O is safer, that means that Jennie-O would have less bacteria than the store brand. So we wonder if the proportion of the packages that have Jennie-O is less. All right, here let's now talk calculator stuff, because this is where it is different from the previous problem. So here we go. Calculator. So I know that X1 and N1 is going to be my Jennie-O information, and X2 and N2 is going to be my store brand information, and I'm going to do the less than symbol when I do my tail. So I'm going to pull this up in stat over to test number 6. I hit the wrong thing. Stat over to tests Number 6. Here we go. Here's the key. This x has to be a number of successes. This has to be a number of successes. That means that you cannot put a decimal there. So when they tell you that there are 75 Genio packages and 33% of the packages had the bacteria, you cannot put just 0.33 here. It's 33% of the 75 packages. And so then you have to calculate what that is. So what I like to do on my calculator is go right here actually to the x1 and go 0.33 times 75. And that is 33% of 75, which is 24.75. You cannot have a part of a success. So I have to go back up to that number and round it appropriately to a whole number. So I will round it to 25. So that makes it 25 out of 75 for the Genio. Now I'm going to do that here for the store brand, which was 45% of 75. And let me see what that number is. So I type 0.45 times 75. Let's see, it's going to be a decimal, so I need to round that appropriately to 34, and then the next one is 75. Okay, now let me check my tails. I think that Genio has less contamination, so that puts it as this less than tail. And I'm going to go down now and calculate that. So therefore, you can see that your z-score is negative 1.5 and your p-value is 0.066. So with that being your stuff, then you can come over here and I'll just leave this like this. See, then you fail to reject. So I do not have evidence that it's safer with Genio, and so on. I'm going to let you hold on to this or just see that, and you can pause the video here to review it if you wanted to review your errors. Now from this, then everybody was able to do the packet problems. I do not recall what pages it was. It was the next one, whatever the next pages are after this, and then the warm-up, and then I'll send, and then you'll take the chapter 22 quiz.